come on.
Thank you, it's a very kind introduction.
It's a very long introduction, you kind of need to sit down. So normally we'd be sitting a little bit higher so that everybody at the back can see us, so apologies, but just once you came in this evening, Áine said, so I was hit by a car door on Saturday and I'm slightly concussed. I was like, let's not use the high stools this evening, just in case we have any more workplace accidents. So apologies to the people at the back, but hopefully you should still be able to hear us. Right, so your social network, GirlCrew, that has been running for a number of years now, as I said earlier on, it has impacted people's lives in incredible ways. And the wonderful thing about a social network is you kind of give the tool to people and say, use it, and the ways that they use it can be surprising sometimes. What's the most surprising thing that GirlCrew members have done as a result of the platform?
Well, there's two that I love. Well, no, actually, there's three that I love, but there's one that sticks out, so I'll go with that. Someone found their long-lost parents through our group.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So someone posted up they had been adopted. It was a closed adoption, I think. They didn't really know. They didn't have very many of the details. And they just posted up like this really grainy old picture of this man and said, I'm pretty sure this man is my father. I have some information about him. It was like a first name and a year of birth, and he was in Dublin. And like, we've seen a lot of things in GirlCrew, but even we were like, eesh. This might be pushing the boat a bit too far. And I, like, literally within a couple of hours, boom, answer, yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who that guy is. Pretty sure he lives on my mum's road. And yeah, she found her long lost dad.
That's a slightly terrifying sort of. But it is. I mean, like, purely from a sort of like a community management perspective. Because the downside of somebody not finding their long-lost parents on GirlCrew must be a terrifying experience. Like, shit, Not that we sold this to people as, come find your long-lost parents, but they tried and they failed. I mean, does that not terrify you?
Sorry, I'm going to stay hydrated just because car door, face, head. No, yes and no. I guess, thank you. We're kind of fortunate in that our community is now old enough, and we've kind of put this in place from the very start, that it's largely self-policing. And I don't mean policing in the kind of draconian way of like everyone's really doctrinarial and you're beaten into submission and following the guidelines. But we put respect as our number one guideline. We've done that always from the very, very start. And because it's a kind of, I mean, I hate the phrase company culture, but like because we make our decisions based on respect and we encourage our members to do the same, it's gotten to the point when someone does something that's disrespectful, other members say, hang on, that like this doesn't fly here. You can ask questions, you can disagree, you can do all those things that adults should and can do, but once it veers into the territory of, I don't know, name calling or whatever, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but once it veers off the course of, okay, this is actually just starting to get a little bit mean, other members will say, this is not within the ethos, either clean up your act or stop. And in comparison to other social networks, I think that was incredibly important for us because it just means the culture of our groups are incredibly positive. And you will see in any group mentality, once you allow the culture and the feeling and the vibe of a group to become negative, it's impossible to turn that back. So if you want a place where respect and where good and all those nice positive things that humans are capable of can happen, then you need to keep the culture positive. It's kind of that whole mentality of why hate and anger and greed and violence are much more viral than positive things, because humans are much more likely to share things that get an angry reaction because it's much more immediate, and you kind of feed that side of your brain much faster than you do with something positive. Something positive is like, oh, yeah, sweet, but I'm probably not going to share it. Something angry, you're sharing that, you're sharing that, you're sharing that. And that's part of the problem that Twitter is now facing, because it's largely built on anger. It's a lot of the problem that Facebook has been facing for a very, very long time, a very, very long time in the land of tech, not in terms of actual human interaction, but in that their platforms are built on anger, and they need eyes on anger.
So, loads of stuff there that I want to come back and talk to, particularly culture. So, who cares about company culture? I do, I love it. So we're going to talk way more about that.
Well, it's not that I don't care, but just the phrase feels a bit tech, which I'm not.
Okay, we definitely will come back to that. But just on the point there, because there's almost like an internal conflict in what you're trying to do, because on the one hand, you want to grow the membership, right? You want to have as many people talking about GirlCrew as possible. And on the other hand, the stuff that gets viral is anger and hate. People don't get excited and say, I'm going to join up that wonderful, friendly, soft, fluffy, cuddly social network. So how do you marry that? How do you make people finding their parents exciting? And because most people don't need to use the social network for that. Most people have their parents.
Yeah, I think it's more obviously because we're a gender-focused platform. Actually, there's an incredible sense of relief when women come together, and not that we're a safe space in the term of kind of the safe space that colleges have now become, but in terms of the actual, this is a place where I can breathe. This is a place where I can be human, where I can be flawed, where I can be interesting, where I can be vibrant, where I can build my client base without feeling like I need to change any of the traits that make me inherently myself. So what it's enabling women and trans people and people who are non-binary to do is actually just take a moment online and reclaim some space online that is incredibly, incredibly difficult to do on other platforms. Just even the thought of a group where you can ask those questions without someone going, you're an idiot, is largely unthinkable. We don't champion women in the same way that we champion men. And you'll see it even with the recent incidents with the US Open with Serena Williams. The Knights comic cartoon that's come out of that is just utterly vile. And yet, this is a woman who's at the top of her game. I mean, are you for real? Can you imagine that happening to anyone else? And it's just kind of a thing of we're actually just reclaiming some space that women can breathe in, women can be themselves in, and women can flourish in, and that's incredibly important to us.
I wasn't going to go so deep into the sort of the mission, but you brought it up, so we'll keep going. That feels like it's light years away from the mission, for want of a better word, that Alva started, in 2014. So maybe it's a good time to talk about what that original mission was, which it definitely wasn't about creating this space initially online. So I'd love to understand how that has evolved from what the original founding idea. So maybe start with what the original founding idea was. Is anybody not familiar with the founding story of GirlCrew? Just throw the hand up. Okay, cool. So worth explaining just for that.
Oh god. Okay. So GirlCrew basically started in an incredibly weird way. We actually started initially on Tinder, which seems totally counterintuitive to what we're trying to build. But effectively, Elva was bored one Friday night and wanted to go out to club night in town. Her sisters were busy, her friends were busy, and she realised, actually, I've taken stock at this point in my life, and my social circle is incredibly small. And once the core numbers are called upon and they're busy, actually I don't really have anyone else that I can draw upon. So at kind of the suggestion of her sister, she changed her gender settings on Tinder. Now this was before Tinder did any kind of advertising or did any sort of partnerships. So actually what she was doing was incredibly unusual. You weren't likely to come across another brand on Tinder. So she put up a little pink text graphic just saying, I'm a woman, I want to go out dancing, let's do that instead. And overnight she had over 100 matches. So immediately she cottoned on, okay, there's something in this, and Tinder's one-on-one conversation. So she moved to Facebook and created a group so everyone could chat together. Effectively she went off to do some household chores, and when she came back, the members that were already in that group had already arranged to meet up and do things without her. And that's really what you want if you're building a service. You don't want to be integral to the service. You need it to get to a point where people can use it without you. I mean, if you're hit by a bus, GirlCrew will still continue. That's perfect. That's the ideal.
Or a car door.
Or by a car door, yes. But the idea really was just women getting together to have the crack and really getting over the anxiety that social media and Tinder largely was also inducing. And it kind of went from there. I actually came across it on Tinder myself and joined as a member that way, and I met Elva at one of the first events I went to in Casey Peaches in town. And I kind of had a horrible experience in that I was relatively new to Dublin. My friends had started to emigrate. I went to college in Galway, so I was that step behind moving to Dublin and moving to London and the States, as people kind of generally tend to do when you're from Mayo. So I came across it, and it was actually just a feeling of such relief. It was in Casey Peaches. I went to the wrong Casey Peaches. First of all, I felt like I was going on a first date. I just remember being incredibly anxious that I was going to go meet women and do something entirely new, and I was flustering with what I was going to wear. It sounds so ridiculous now. But I was genuinely like, no, I want to make a good impression on these women and like, really get to know people. So I went to Casey Beach's, found a table that I thought was GirlCrew, went up to the table, kind of like, are you guys GirlCrew? I got this look of just like, what are you on about? And I kind of went outside, and then I was messaging friends from home. We're in this giant WhatsApp group, and I was like, this is ridiculous. There's no women here. I don't know what they're talking about. And then, so I went back onto Facebook, realised that I was at the wrong Casey Beaches, so I had to like peg it across town, arrive like sweaty and flustered and just completely bamboozled. And I just walked into this like glorious afternoon tea, and it was genuinely one of the best experiences of my life. I'm not a fan of tea, I don't drink it, but what I enjoyed was it was just people there just to chat with each other and leave any kind of ego or anything at the door, and everyone was there for the same goal of just having the crack and getting to know people. And that was my first introduction to it, and I'll always remember that, and I'll always cherish that memory. And it's not very grandiose, it's not some amazing thing where we were at some high-flying tech event. I literally met people over coffee and cake on Dane Street. But then I was kind of chatting to Elva about how she could make the network better for herself and for members and make it easier, and then she was kind of like, do you want to help organise this? And I was like, yeah, sure, I mean, why not? And kind of just went from there.
Okay, so I'm going to park the question about the evolution of the platform. We'll come back to it. Let's talk about you, and then at that stage, what were you doing at the time, other than getting into the wrong Casey Beaches? Like, what was going on?
I was actually working for an educational publishing company, so I did my BA and my master's with the view to become creative director of Random House. That's been my goal for a very, very long time. It's now been parked, but I will come back to it at one point. But I was basically, my plan was to work for 2 years in Dublin in any job I could get into in publishing. It's an incredibly tight and closed network in Ireland. There are very few jobs. You're basically waiting for someone to die or retire for jobs to open. So I managed to get into an educational publisher. I was like, it's not fiction, but by Jove, I'll take it. And yeah, I ended up being there for 4.5 years, and it really was just kind of by the end of it. But I stayed so long because the people were incredible. So I'm not going to try and do that because that's weird, but what did you think you were going to get out of it? My aim for that job
Yeah.
was just a stepping stone to fiction, really. I mean, I think if you're working in an industry like publishing, publishing kind of has this view of, I guess, being like nerdy, bookish people reading in the corner and everything's cheery and wonderful, but it's actually super, super cutthroat. There are very few jobs, and those jobs are diminishing. So when you're trying to get into a career that has very set goals, very set delineation, you kind of need to follow the path. So you do your master's, you do an unpaid internship, you get a leg in somewhere, you probably do another unpaid internship when you get to London, you try and get a leg in somewhere, and it's this kind of revolving door of trying to get to know people. So my plan was to kind of get a grounding in publishing in Ireland and then leave and go to London and then New York.
How were you during that period then of, say, the startup space, tech entrepreneurship? Was there nothing at all?
No, nothing.
Anybody in the family who?
Nope.
Okay. How did you make the decision then to stop and decide GirlCrew is what I want to put my focus on? How did you evaluate that?
Yeah, that was a kind of a tricky one, and it was done on a Lewis, so I can imagine the people around me was just like, this one is bonkers. Effectively what was happening was GirlCrew, we were working on GirlCrew on the side when we were all working full time, and when I say on the side, I mean the vast majority of the first 2 years of our company is done by a Facebook Messenger, and that's investment announcements, that's people working, that's genuinely, and that's no word of a lie, we were doing everything via Facebook Messenger for a very, very long time. We piggybacked off Facebook for ages, and it's something that I would definitely advocate for. Why build something if someone else already has? But I think the idea for us really was we're getting to the point where it was like we either, no, I can't use that phrase, so we either need to make the leap or we just stop. And we had gotten an offer of investment, things were taking up more and more of our time. It was quite clear that we had cottoned on to something. At the same time, I was also sick of my current role, so I started looking for other jobs. And I'd actually gotten down to the second round. I was kind of waiting for final calls on an interview process with another company, with Gillen Macmillan. And then it was getting to the point of like, do I start with another company to potentially leave? Do I veer off and just pause publishing, or like what do I do? So I remember just ringing my dad on the Lewis, and I was just like, I don't really know what to do. And he's like, well, I mean, you don't have any kids, you don't have a mortgage, so what do you want to do? And as I was talking through kind of the options, it was just quite clear that this was a chance that I would regret if I didn't take it. So this is mental. I rang up and withdrew my application for the job and typed up my resignation letter on my phone that morning, went into work, printed it off, handed it in, and then I was with GirlCrew full time a month later.
So it sounds like your dad gave you a positive encouragement, endorsement.
Yeah, I mean,
was anybody saying no? This is the stupidest idea you've ever. No.
Our family are. I mean, our family are great. My family are overachievers, and it's an incredibly matriarchal family as well. My sister Joan is actually competing in the figure at the moment to be kind of one of the first female. It's the Vendée Globe, so it's like a round the world race. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're surgeons, they're engineers, etc., etc. And that was incredibly important to us. It's something that's instilled in us from a very young age, is that you just go for it and you just keep working hard and you get your head down and you plough on. And I guess I've been very fortunate to have that kind of family mentality. But it also is just a case of why not? Like, I mean, if you don't, obviously you need to be smart in that, like, okay, we have money to pay ourselves. I wouldn't recommend that people just go around quitting their jobs with no plan. And we are definitely methodical and planners in that sense as well, which does help. But it's important to try. I think it's always important to try and experiment and test and see how things work. And if they don't work, fine. Like, it's not the end of the world if things don't work. But it's important to at least give it a good punt and give it your best shot.
So let's talk about, because just a couple of minutes ago you talked about feeling it was very clear that there was a pull, right? It was very clear that this was something that could be sustained and could be grown. So what were you seeing at that stage? Because you're talking, like, there's some really interesting stuff there in terms about being methodical and having a process and testing. So what were you seeing in terms of the product at that stage?
It was just people were asking for it faster than we could grow it. People were like, oh, my sister lives in Melbourne, do you have one there? I'm moving to London, do you have one there? I'm going here, like, I want to travel Europe, do you have them in X, Y, and Z? And we were just like, no, but like, we can set one up because it's a Facebook group. Yes, we do have one, here you go. So it was just that thing of people wanted it. And I think when you have something that people want and that you're excited by and that you can actually see the genuine need for, and also all of us have used it ourselves. Like, I joined it first as a member, so I could immediately see the value of it. Pamela's used it a lot herself. Elva obviously initially set it up. So I think when you have something that we all use it in different ways and very differently, and at different stages and different reasons and different whys. So I think when you have something like that, it's quite easy just to be like, okay, all in.
How long term was that sort of like that planning and decision making, where you're kind of like, let's go another month with this and see if we double our usage, or were you thinking, let's give it a year and see where we get to? Like, when you were setting your goals?
Well, I guess we were slightly different in that our first offer investment actually came to us. We weren't seeking investment at the time that we got it, and I mean, that's fortunate, I guess. But like, yeah, we kind of just cobbled together a business plan and had to get it over, and sent. We just kind of were realizing that if we wanted to give this the best possible shot that we can, at some point we need to start putting other decisions on hold. And when you get to the point of I need to put other decisions on hold, I think you need to decide, what am I doing with my life a little bit, and not in terms of I need to have the next 50 years mapped out, but just in that, if your business is something that you're passionate about and you want to grow, can you give a year to it? Can you give more to it? Why aren't you doing that? And if the why is that I can't afford to, fine, you need to kind of maybe figure out how else you can bring it into your life. But if the why is just not good enough, if it doesn't hold any weight, then it's likely that you need to start moving on, I think.
But I think even stepping slightly further back, you know, when did the three of you start to realize that this could actually be something that could sustain somebody going full time? When did it shift from being, this is interesting and there's some organic growth and people are getting some value, to thinking, we could actually build a business based on this?
Well, so Pamela, kind of as our third co-founder, she joined a couple of months after she met Elva at the Surf Summit as part of the Web Summit back when it was in ACL. And she had always wanted to be an entrepreneur and said, I've had a little bit of a think, and I kind of have a proposition for you. So Pamela was definitely very much the driving force behind turning it into a business. We all wanted it to be a business, and we all knew it could be, but she was a business and technology journalist with the Irish Times for a long time, so she kind of had a lot more insight in that field than we did. Our plan initially was to grow it and then look for investment, but when she was interviewing Jeff Wieners, the CEO of LinkedIn, for the Irish Times, he was kind of like, yeah, I don't really care about this, tell me what you're doing, and then he offered investment. So at that point we were like, okay, we now have an offer of investment from someone who knows the technology landscape incredibly well, and we would be foolish not to pursue this. Then it was just getting to the point of, we had still initially planned that we would keep working to cut costs and keep costs down, but it was just becoming untenable. So that was kind of a motivator for us.
Was there like a conversation, because it sounds like Pamela came in with a very clear vision of, I want to do entrepreneurship. This seems like a nice opportunity for me to pursue entrepreneurship. How did you, between the three of you, kind of hammer out what the mission was going to be and the company values around achieving that? Was it pretty easy, or was there a little bit of...
It was relatively easy. We actually just went away for the weekend together and cobbled together a business plan. And I mean, I say business plan, but like, this thing was like the ugliest, most rickety thing you've ever seen in your life. But it worked because it gave us space to think and to talk through what we wanted. And actually, when it came down to it, our values were coming at it from a slightly different angle, but actually we were all aligned in the ultimate purpose of the platform. And I think just even writing down the kind of the core elements of what we wanted and where we wanted to go, it kind of brought in the fact that we wanted this to be social, we wanted this to be breaking down class things, we wanted it to be breaking down gender issues, we wanted it to be encouraging women to be entrepreneurs and be the best that they could, or if they were in careers and wanted to achieve that, and how do you go from intern to CEO. And I think the plan for it always really, our vision has always been far, far bigger than our means. And that's been something that's been incredibly important. But it's also really stood by us because it means that we're always pushing for more.
Talk a little bit about, because it's interesting when you're kind of talking about all of the different values that fell out from that experience of writing the business plan. And the things that you wanted to be. Were you looking around, or what was informing that? Did you have experiences of seeing other people try to launch similar services or products offline or online that you wanted to aspire to be, or definitely didn't want to be?
I didn't know. I'm probably like the worst technologer there's ever been. As I'm going through it, I'm like, no, actually, no, I didn't look at that at all. I think it's more for me personally, anyway. Obviously, mixed race descent. So for me, something that was breaking down a lot of the kind of societal issues that we're having in Ireland, but also worldwide, were incredibly important. And being part of a company with good morals and good standing is actually incredibly important to me. And I think as I've kind of gotten a bit older and more involved with GirlCrew, I realised actually this is core to who I am and intrinsic to my being. And it's something that we've grown up with. Our parents are very keen to kind of instill that in us as well. But it's also important to Elva and Pamela. Both of them are women who want to be involved in something that has a great reputation. And not just a great reputation for business, but a great reputation for doing something different, for breaking the mold, and for actually just being a place that people can put their trust and faith in. And that's something that we've worked incredibly hard to try and maintain, and incredibly hard to kind of foster. So I think for us, and we've dissolved partnerships because our members weren't happy with the alignment of the other brand values, and the brand values of companies didn't fully align with theirs. And that wasn't even campaigns that those companies had in Ireland, it was campaigns those companies had internationally. We've worked with other partnerships because we felt that they could add value to our users and to our member base. And I think that kind of is important. If you're telling people that you want to create something, then you need to be creating it yourself.
Can you give us an example of that? I mean,
yeah. So for example, there was I'm not going to name the company, but there was we used to work with a cosmetics company a fair bit, and basically they ran campaigns out of the US and in the Middle East that were they wouldn't fly in Ireland, and that's why they weren't run here. But the fact that we were kind of working with this company, and the team in Ireland were fantastic, so I would never run them down, or I mean, it's not running the company down either. This is a decision that was totally out of their hands. But the campaigns that they created in other countries didn't align with our values, and they were not great. And our members were like, well, why are you working with them here if in other countries they're perpetuating ideas that we stand against? And as a company, we had to say, you know what, you're right, and dissolved.
How I mean, like, you know, part of the plan and part of the reason that you've been raising so much money within the last 12 months is to grow this, right? I mean, like, you're going to go into new areas, you're going to go into new cultures. How do you manage that this doesn't sit well with our culture and our society ethos? Because, you know, something that runs in a particular city in the US mightn't sit very well with people in Dublin, and you're going to get members on both sides pulling from you. That's going to be a huge challenge.
I will be, and I think really the point for us is that our aim isn't to be breaking down people or telling anyone or any one nationality that their viewpoint on life is wrong, or people of different religions or whatever, that they are wrong for adhering to that. But I think it is important for us to be championing women. And if you're championing women but you're working with companies that aren't, like, that is problematic. Because really what you're saying is, actually no, we champion a certain type of woman, and if you're outside of that, it doesn't really matter, because we know who we're aiming for. And our aim is ultimately to be the largest female network in the world and to reach all the women that we can. And when you're saying that you want to reach all the women that you can, it means more than just the women in the room. It means more than the women in your city. It genuinely means that you need to be looking down your supply chain, whatever that means, and saying, are we doing the best that we can by the women in these areas at every level? And if we're not, then how do we fix that? And it's not even that we want to be creating problems that we then have to overcome. If that happens inadvertently, then obviously yes, we need to overcome them. But we should be thinking from the outset, what is the impact we're having here? How do we make sure that's positive? And that's kind of the mind frame that we go into anywhere with.
It can be challenging, I think, for an organisation like yourselves that has a for good mission. You know, so like, you know, that it's driving societal impact, and the measurement of your success is very much focused on societal and cultural benefit, right? Do you find it challenging to communicate that to investors? Because, you know, they're investing their dollars, I guess, in this, and they're expecting at some point a dollar outcome. How do you communicate that or translate that social impact into the language of investors?
Yeah, it has been difficult. I think Ireland is great. Ireland is a great testing ground, and we've been very fortunate, I think, to be an Irish company is fantastic. Definitely, as you kind of go more into the States, that conversation becomes a little more difficult to navigate, because VCs, etc., have a tick box, and if it's kind of the qualitative effect. But at some level, you kind of just need to trust in yourself. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. If you're creating a product that is genuinely aiming to make a difference and do something new and do something exciting, and not become a part of the boys' club, then you need to stand over your product and say, yeah, we don't fit your mold, but the issue isn't us, it's you. And then just kind of keep pushing that. And I think it's incredibly important and empowering and enriching to not always bend your company values for a dollar. And that's not to say that we kind of are closing doors on companies that we would work with, because we're definitely open to working with companies at every level and kind of across the wide range of industries. But I think it's important for us to be doing what we want to do and what our members want to do and what our members, are there for as well.
It strikes me as an example of a company where the founders have an absolute deep understanding of the problem being faced, right, within these communities, you've lived it. You were pulled to the product because it fixed your problem. So you deeply understand it. But then the investors who've invested in you, and I'm thinking of people like like Jeff, with the experience that he has. How have you lent on that external expertise? Do you say, I really don't know about X, I'm going to go and ask my investors, or do you, between the founders have those conversations, or do sometimes your investors come along and say, this is the stupidest thing you've done so far, why are you doing it, you should be doing it this way? Talk a little bit about that relationship with the investor.
Yeah, so I guess we kind of have done it if there's a specific problem, then we kind of have open conversations with them and things like that, and kind of we send them monthly updates and reports and kind of how the company is doing and things like that. We could have probably lent on them more, and I think we will as we kind of get to the next step, so to speak. But having a good rapport with your investors is obviously important, and I think it's important to lean on them when you're facing challenges as well as through the rewards, because obviously there are people who have expertise that you don't have. There are people who've gone ahead of you, and we've been incredibly fortunate also to have a board of advisors and things here, so like Oisin Kim, who's involved with Web Doctors, one of our technical advisors and things like that, and we don't have a technical founding member, which is kind of rings alarm bells for a lot of people. So he has been incredibly important to us in terms of helping us with the product and developing that. So it's definitely important to pull on the information and the help from as many people as you can, and not necessarily always people who are kind of at the very, very top, but even just people who are one step ahead of you, because they remember more closely what it's like to actually be working with incredibly tight resources or incredibly tight time restrictions. I think sometimes there can be a disconnect when people think, oh, well, sure, just throw money at the problem. And you're like, yeah, what money? So I think it's important to look within your own network, but also look in the wider ecosystem of whatever city you're in.
Can we talk a little bit about that having somebody like Oisin as a board director? Because you mentioned earlier that you largely grew on the back of somebody else's product and somebody else's infrastructure on the Facebook Messenger and group platform. Why did you decide that wasn't going to be sustainable, and felt the need to do your own product? And then why having somebody like Oisin was useful for that? Yeah,
well, I guess, the problem, obviously, the benefit of using someone else's product is that you can test things that you would never be able to test on your own necessarily. Obviously, the immediate downside is that you're at the whim of somebody else's product. So we had built this huge network, and if Facebook decided, oh, groups are rubbish, we're trashing them, that's your whole community gone. There was also elements and things like you can't get invitations over 500 members, and there was just lots of kind of logistical issues that were just becoming a nightmare to manage. And if you're building your own business, you kind of need to think of, can my business, like we wouldn't be, so for example, if Facebook crashed, we're gone. And it's kind of unlikely, but that is a concern. You can't always, you can leech off people for a while, but eventually they'll pull you off and throw you away. So you kind of need to be thinking about your own sustainability and how you're doing that, and also what you want to build, because the product that we've built is similar in some ways, but actually quite dissimilar in lots of others. So when you're reliant on someone else's product to host yours, you have no say over that at all.
To talk then a little bit about, because that's very different, listening to your customers and living the problem and sort of like, providing the solution manually or through someone else's platform, and then saying, well, what will I build, first?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that a lot of early stage founders struggle with, is like, I kind of get a sense of the problem, but what am I actually going to deliver as my first product? How did you go about that? Because none of you had ever built a product before, right?
No, so we outsourced the tech initially to a company that had kind of said that they would build the whole thing for you, and it was kind of like an investment in building one, and that ended up being a disaster. And then we hired and brought it in-house and kind of built it ourselves. We knew the basic model that we would need. We knew that we would need location-based groups. We knew that we would need international topic-based groups. We knew that we would need messaging. So we started with those elements, and as we've kind of grown, we're adding more features all the time. And our app literally just launched last August, so the actual physical product is not around that long. Well, physical, I guess, in the digital sense, but we knew kind of what our users would need because we'd been building it on Facebook, and we knew the elements that they needed that to host the events, what do they need? Okay, you need to be able to comment and post, you need to be able to create an event, you need to be able to invite people, people need to be able to opt in, opt out, you need to be able to message attendees. So there's lots of stuff that actually we already knew from being hosted on Facebook, and because of that we were able to create a platform that does those things. Now obviously we have the benefit of being able to add the additional features that we want and keep kind of reiterating the product and make it better for our community.
So we might talk a little bit now about the sort of marrying the community values, the values of your users to the company, because you've seen amazing growth. I mean, like, you know, I don't know what the latest figures are, but certainly you'd been talking earlier in the year about north of 100,000 people actively using the platform, which I think is amazing. What have you learned? Because you've taken this to a couple of different jurisdictions and cultures. What have you learned about ways to get people onto the platform that doesn't, what front of piss off the users? Because I can think of like ways that you could get people talking on the platform and using it very actively. You know, you could say something terribly controversial about the US Open and drive a whole bunch of people to have this huge debate on both sides of the argument. But that doesn't really feel like it would match your values. So what did you try anything like that and it fail, or?
Yeah, we've tried various different things. I mean, the benefit obviously of it being location based means that you can test things in different markets, and I think the main thing that we've actually found is that you can't impose your culture on other groups. So for example, content that would be totally fine and blasé in Dublin and would barely get a reaction, people will fly off the handle, even in Aberdeen or in Edinburgh or things like that, or events that are totally fine in one city, or people are like giving out yards about it in another. And it's important for us, for people, because obviously we're local, it's important for people to feel like they do have a kind of ownership over the groups and that the culture of their city is being represented fairly. We're not trying to impose Dublin values all over the world. What we actually want to do is to connect people in their own city. So if you want to allow people to connect in their own city, you need to give them the space and the freedom to do that.
That's something fascinating there about sort of like, you know, you provide a platform, and then the group or the local community feel it's suddenly theirs.
Yeah.
You know, you're a bystander. You know, they don't care so much. Have you had an experience in the past of getting that wrong, where you just entirely pissed off an entire city?
Yes. Well, it's not that we pissed off an entire city, but we've had cities that just don't work, and I think that is definitely a culture fit, maybe, or maybe they were too far and we were just kind of overreaching at the time. We did some tests in Asia, for example, and they just did not work, and we just kind of wanted to see what would happen, because obviously in terms of language and culture and various things, that's quite far removed from the experiences of the other groups that we have worked in so far. And it was quite interesting to see that there was initial kind of interest and spark, and then it kind of faded. So obviously we were like, okay, immediately we probably need super users on the ground who are actually able to go out and talk to people. So we created a system of community admins. So they were deleting spam, they were approving members, they were hosting events. Then when we moved to the app, they didn't really perform the same function. And we kind of didn't want that to be lost. We didn't want them to feel like they had put in, like some of these people, like genuinely people who were volunteering as admins, and they are putting in like north of 20 plus hours work a week, just out of their own want. They just, you know, they want to be part of it. They love the group. They've used it for their own reasons, and we still use them. Like, we have a kind of a private network for admins and community managers and stuff. So we wanted to transfer that feeling of reward and work and ethic and all those things that we brew in Facebook onto the app. So we now have a system of community ambassadors and social ambassadors via the app as well, and they're given shout outs. We send them swag and various things throughout the year, and we do like a ambassador of the season, so they're written up about on the blog, and we champion them back into the groups. But I guess for us it was important for people to feel like they were valued, and these, like, genuinely, the company or the groups wouldn't be as large and as active as they are without these members, and we couldn't have just torn that away. That would have been incredibly, well, just rude, like, to be honest. So it was important for us, for members, to feel like
they were being heard and they had a voice, because people can also go to them and say, oh, I'd love this, and they pass it on to us. People, like members, can do that directly to us as well, but they get to see a bit of the face, I guess, of the brand and feel like they're part of a larger network. Because we have had it before where people didn't even realise that GirlCrew was in other cities. They thought it was just their city, and they're like, this is glass, and then like, oh no, it's in like 50 other cities worldwide.
Talk a little bit about how you then, because when I was looking, just doing some reading around the announcement of the funding, and you were talking about target cities, and you named a fairly eclectic bunch of cities. What is it about a new territory that makes you look at it and say, this is going to work? Is it sort of like density of population or the demographic profile, or do you look at competitors? Because your competitor space is really fragmented. You've got online, you've got offline events, you've got messaging. There's plenty of stuff that's out there. So how do you pick the cities that you picked with the US announcement? How did you
population density is a key one for us. If it's kind of below a certain amount, then it's much more of a struggle. You kind of need a critical mass of initial members, roughly about 100, 150 for a city to work. It's kind of that empty room effect. If you go into an empty room and there's 4 other people, you're likely just to retreat into a corner. But if you go into a room that's a bit more buzzy and there's content is being posted and things are happening, then you're much more likely to get engaged. So we generally look for cities that have a good population density, have a decent level of social mobility, that people are there, are working, generally college educated. Like, this is kind of our core. We obviously have people much more outside that, because our super users actually run from about 19, and we have people that are in their 60s that are also super users for us. So it's the full gamut of kind of the female adult experience. But in terms of launching, we look for population density, social mobility, I've lost the word. Concussion, yes. In terms of work, the availability of work, how college educated are percentage wise, if there's colleges in the area. So there's kind of a few different rationale that we would take, and we kind of map it out from there. And we've done tests, as I said, in cities that kind of didn't match those criteria, and some have still worked, so they're kind of, in terms of the data, they're a bit of an outlier, but we know which ones are more than likely will work, and the kind of the strategy for rolling into those cities as well.
And the competitive piece, because it kind of strikes me that the primary, value proposition to women who might join the platform is find a friend, and then they'll find a friend, and then they'll leave. It's kind of like the dating apps thing. So do you when did you realize that you kind of needed to start offering more to keep them on the platform, so they're not going to just go off and...
We didn't. To be frank, we didn't set that up initially. That actually came from members. So after Dublin was growing, still via Facebook at this point, it was growing quite well, and people kind of were chatting, and then people were talking about careers, and people were talking about various different things, and then people were like, I joined this for the events, I didn't join this for the careers element, so can you set up a separate careers group? Yeah, sure, we did that. Then that started growing. Then people were talking about entrepreneurship in there, I work for a Big Four or something, I don't want to see entrepreneurship content, can we set up a separate group? Yeah, sure, we did that. So then it kind of just grows of people's interest, because people aren't just social, it's everything. They want a solution where they can go and they can feel supported. So we have mums, we have bloggers, we have travel, we have fashion and beauty, we have entrepreneurs, we have careers, whatever there's enough people talking about and they request that, then we can launch that group. So it's quite easy for us to allow people to do what they want to do via our platform. It's literally a matter of seconds to open a group in a technical sense. So it was important for us to create a space where people can do that. And the networking part is not something that we'd kind of initially thought of, but people are getting houses through us, people are getting jobs through us, they're getting dog sitters, babysitters, anything you can imagine, like tax lawyers, plumbers, everything. And the reality is that women make 80% of the purchasing power. So when you're talking about consumers, you're talking about upwardly mobile women who are independent and working and financially stable, well, as stable as anyone is in 2018, but you're talking about people who have an incredible amount of influence and spending power and interests and vitality in the world, and they weren't being listened to, and they weren't being given an opportunity to talk to one another, and that's what we've done.
I'm going to stop this section in just a second and move over to the floor for questions, so get your questions ready. We'll spend a couple more minutes doing that, but just before I finish on this segment, you talked about a career goal of becoming a creative director at Random House, so it's sort of within the fiction publishing space. You sort of introduce yourself as CMO of this incredibly successful and very specific platform for women. What do you feel personally has been the most surprising part of the journey? And do you still feel like it's bringing you towards creative director of
I don't know
fictional
if it's
publishing
bringing me
house?
there anymore. I had a list of skill sets that I would need to get there, and they're kind of gathering dust. But I think the surprising thing is just I sometimes I'll just meet a random person. I like even at Lecture Picnic. I'm also part of a DJ collective, but someone came up to me at a Lecture Picnic. I'd never met this woman before, and she's like, "Oh my God, you're from GirlCrew," and I was like, "Yeah, well, I don't know which way this is going to go, so maybe." And she's like, "No, it changed my life. Genuinely, like I can't tell you how happy I am that GirlCrew exists." And for me, like I didn't set out to change people's lives, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is a bit overwhelming." But for her, she had managed to find friends through it. She found a house through it, and she was really like, "No." When I was really, really struggling to like settle into Dublin, I came across GirlCrew, and like she was like. I feel a bit emotional even thinking about her, but I've met other people in my life that have had a similar experience, and I kind of feel like, well, for me, that's a success, because I don't really, like, if you're helping people genuinely be better versions of themselves, that you are able to grow through it, that you're able to help other people to grow through it, I don't really, like, what more do you want? Do you know what I mean?
Good place to end it. From us. Ash, have you got the microphone there? So if you have a question, just pop the hand up and Ash will come around with the mic. Have you got the mic? Panic, hear you.
Who would like to ask the first question? Anyone? I can ask a question, yeah. So I've managed similar-ish groups. So I used to run the Women in Tech program at Web Summit, and we have had a Facebook group, it's still there, but I'm not there anymore. And one thing we really struggled with was the angry conversation. How do you manage that? Because it's really, we often want to just like delete the conversation, but you can't do that. You have to kind of acknowledge it, but try and stray people away from it.
Yeah, it's quite difficult, and like community management is not easy, particularly as groups kind of grow and people feel ownership of it. We kind of have a process that we've tried to perfect, is the wrong word, I guess, refine or at least attempt, whereby we will see the original post, let the comments run, at a point where we feel like, okay, this is veering towards the disrespect side of things, we'll keep a close eye on it. And we have lots of eyes, I guess, on conversations, so people are aware of where things are going. If needs be, an admin or someone will step in and comment and say, look, the major point of this discussion is fine, but actually the language that you're now using is not fine. And more so the issues that we have had is around the language people are using, so whether it's racist or abusive or homophobic or things like that, or trans exclusionary. So at that point, if the person refuses to, they don't have to step down, they don't have to acknowledge what they're saying is wrong, but they just have to basically clean up your language a bit. If it gets to that point, we have a warning system in place, so you'll be given a warning. If you're issued another warning, you can be temporarily moved, or you can be permanently banned. And we have banned people from the network, like tiny, minuscule amounts, and it sounds extreme. But it's generally because people were just refusing to budge on their position and continuing to use terminology or language that was just disgusting. So for us, it is important to keep that respect piece, but also we're very aware that we're working with adults. So you don't have to like each other, you don't even have to get on with each other, you don't even have to agree with each other or be anyway in the same realm, but you need to speak kindly to each other, and if you don't, we will take action.
Any questions?
Hi, thanks for your time tonight. This is in relation to the whole managing the community part as well. Now I know that in this day and age, with digital communities and stuff, you are, kind of willing to meet new people and strangers and the likes. But in regards to safety and regulations and stuff, did you find that that's a big aspect of your kind of management process? Like, is that something you had to bear in mind, or even just how skeptical some people can be in regards to these kind of platforms?
Yeah, definitely. So we initially started off, the platform was 25 plus, and that really set the culture of this being an adult space for adults, and that kind of permeated through the events that were happening. So it's very unlikely that someone would put themselves in a position of danger at that point. We also have a much stricter verification process than other apps, just to kind of ensure the identity of people as much as possible. As we've kind of grown, the age range has increased, but we are strictly no under 18s. And if we find that someone under 18 has managed to get in, they've lied about their birth date or their identity and things like that, they're immediately removed. In terms of the safety part, most of our events are actually group based, and most of them are in public spaces. So the likelihood of something happening is incredibly low. You can also report members, you can report the host, and you can report the event. So we have a warning system effectively where you can select the little buttons and you give a drop down of reason. There could be spam, illegal, bullying, etc. And we get immediate alert that something is not what it seems. And if it's in breach, we just remove it and remove the person potentially as well. But safety is obviously a concern. I think when you're dealing with any kind of community, and particularly one that's encouraged to meet, safety is definitely something that we take very, very seriously.
Can I ask, like, how do you communicate? Is this working? How do you communicate that to the? It's really weird. I was going to shout. How do you communicate that to the members? Do you make them like sign some code of conduct when they join, and do you say this is your responsibility and this is how you're going to manage it, or do you empower your ambassadors? Do you have like heaps of content? Do you have some sort of system that can flag that, or how because that's a huge
yeah.
work.
So we effectively have everything that you just mentioned. So when you join, you have there's community guidelines in terms of your conduct and the conduct that's expected of you when using the platform. We also have incredibly extensive terms and conditions for use. Then people themselves, at this point, we have it's kind of one of those things that's almost slightly intuitive as well, as you can just sense sometimes when something is off, and people just alerting us to that. If we see, okay, this person has been flagged a couple of times, something is obviously wrong. It has gone to the point where we've just talked to the person and just said, look, something is wrong here. And sometimes it could just be a case of phrasing, and oftentimes it can be a language barrier. We've had things before where people have flagged things and it turned out it was like English was the individual's fourth language, so just the phrasing was kind of strange and people were kind of like, oh. But again, it's kind of that trust piece definitely comes into it. Our community ambassadors are very engaged. They know the majority of the members, like digitally and things like that, and we also are familiar with our super users too, and the people that kind of are hosting the events. And the reality is that we so far have not had an incident, touch wood, but we're a platform for adults, and people it's a dual responsibility that we have. We have obviously a duty of care to our members as far as applicable, but they also have a duty of responsibility in terms of their conduct as well, and that's something that we definitely try to instill.
Great question, thank you.
My question is in relation to the platform. I'm a GirlCrew user myself, and I was just wondering, is it an issue, or do you think it's something you'd like to change? The fact that obviously you have your events and you can attend events and you can see who's going and who's hosting them, but the fact that largely when these events are created, the communication around the events and the organisation is usually taken off the platform in WhatsApp groups, or I don't know if it's through Facebook, mostly WhatsApp groups, and a lot of the comments would be girls commenting their numbers and things like that. Is that something you hope to change, or how do you?
Yeah, so it's something that we're actually working on actively at the moment. So obviously we launched the platform without all the bells and whistles that it eventually will have, but group messaging is literally being worked on as we speak, so that will definitely help that. We also find that the problem that people have, they'll create a WhatsApp group for that one event and then they need to come back to the platform. So in terms of from a business point of view, actually there's the repeat use because they don't want to be part of the WhatsApp group, it's part of the larger community. In a technical sense, group messaging is being worked on. So yes, it's one of those things of like people are using us in tandem with other apps and with other platforms, and I think that's most people's experience of digital life now, really.
So you mentioned before that you work a lot with partners. So I'm guessing that the revenue that you make isn't through the end users themselves. Can you describe a little bit about the partners that you work with and how they deliver value to your users? Maybe a little bit more of an overview?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment we currently are running two. So we have a premium subscription both here in San Francisco, and that's a paid option. So you get exclusive hosted events, you get a private calendar, and kind of a whole host of benefits for being a premium member. It's €10 a month here or $20 a month in San Francisco, just based on kind of logistics and costing. Then the other thing is that we work with companies. So we work with Microsoft, Dell, PayPal. We've worked with independents as well, like Folkster and things like that as well. So they provide additional value because they, for example, we have GirlCrew Pro, which is actually in Huckletree on September 20th. Nice little plug. So they provide value to our members because we are able to give them a better experience offline. They sponsor the event and things like that. And then the additional thing is for our entrepreneurs, we've partnered with Dell EMC, so we run a private supper club for female entrepreneurs. It's a roundtable, very intimate event where there's kind of a circle of trust idea where people can't discuss things. So by being a GirlCrew member, you get advanced access to all those things. Technically, GirlCrew Pro is a public event, but the tickets never reach the public. Same with the Dell EMC Supper Club, that's only for GirlCrew members. So we've been able to add value to our members by giving them access to either information or events or kind of individuals that they wouldn't necessarily have access to otherwise.
Thank you very much.
Hi there. Just curious to know what you say you're in 50 cities currently, and what the profile of your users are. So I'm sure you've done your bell curve. So is 80%, 25 to 45? I'm just curious to know what the demographic is around, and is that consistent across each of the cities that you're in? Just to get a feel for it.
Yeah, so as I said, we initially started at 25 plus, so we have a very strong core of kind of about 25 to 39. They're obviously all female, they're generally college educated, generally in the professionals, they're generally socially mobile, predominantly single and predominantly renting. But then as we kind of get older and as we started adding more elements, we were getting more women who were entrepreneurs, generally married, generally had a professional career, but then became entrepreneurs after. So it's kind of nice because you get to see people moving from that professional element to something more focused on themselves. As we started to grow, particularly in the UK and in the States, we've actually started skewing younger, which is not something that we'd ever anticipated or expected. So we now have a growing cohort between 19 and 21, which is not like none of our advertising even is focused on that, so we're not actually entirely sure how they have found us, but they are now a growing demographic within the platform. And also we're finding that there's another outlier that we also hadn't really focused on, which is kind of around the 55 to 69, because there are people who are now empty nesters, etc., and they have more free time, they also have disposable income, etc., and they're looking to do something with other women, and they do trips and hotel breaks and all those kinds of things.
So the 25 to 39, is that like 60% of your membership?
Yeah, it's probably in and around that. It's definitely the majority. It's shrinking because as we've been starting to grow, the other groups, the other demographics have increased. But I would say, it's probably around the kind of 60-65%.
Okay, thank you.
Listening to that profile, I'm sure the likes of Bumble, BFF are crying out to work with you. Do you work with other platforms or similar apps?
We haven't worked with Bumble. When we came onto the market with them, they were still focusing predominantly on the dating side of things, and I know they've kind of moved into the BFF space, and they also do Bumble Biz, which is kind of entrepreneurial. The main difference between us and them is they are individual swiping on women, which that is what it is. But we have not worked with them as yet, but I know we've been in similar events and in event spaces with them, and there's a couple of other community groups that we have worked with out of the States around our founders. We did a founders forum there not too long ago, and we had kind of similar female communities involved in that as well.
Anyone else?
Hi, how are you? Could you talk a little bit about the competitive intensity that you face. So when you're looking at cities and markets growing, is it a factor that there's competition in the markets, or is that a draw? It's a proven model in that case. And yeah, how you address that competitive intensity.
It's not really a factor, no, to be honest. I guess the thing is for us is that we are slightly different from the other main competitors in the kind of the female friendship space, if you want to call it that. And we don't really see ourselves as being a direct competition, so more as something that people would use in tandem. People are still going to use Bumble for dating, for example. We're not a dating platform, so that's not an element that we have. I think for us it's important more so of the demographic of the city, and that kind of informs the relative success of the growth of our platform within that city itself.
Yeah, just have a very quick question about, I suppose, bootstrapping in the very early stages of setting up a community like this. So I'm working with a team now at the moment to try and build community, and in a similar way to yourselves, I think like we have a product that isn't just the platform itself. Like you are obviously organising events, and so I think we have a similar kind of setup there that you're trying to get your users to kind of push certain things, and the community. I suppose the challenge that we're facing at the moment is that we have yet to capture and kind of encourage the super users that you talked about there to actually go and motivate them and give them everything that they need to make the platform as good as it could be and get like content up on the platform and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any kind of ways that you did that and ways that you thought were better than others?
Yeah, so our super users kind of identified themselves in terms of how often they were posting initially. So, and then obviously you can track people in terms of the logins, etc. So what we've kind of done is we've done different things. We've literally just put a shout out sometimes in the group for like who wants to be a community ambassador or admin. Here we're looking for people who are active and are interested in kind of making the city the best it can be and kind of encouraging that kind of feeling of ownership. We've also done things around surveys, and the people that filled it in the most we then contacted again, because obviously they're the most likely to be involved in your platform. We've run competitions, we've done various things to kind of encourage people to get involved. And we've always kind of championed the idea of any member can host, attend, or create an event. So it's very much the idea of kind of making the access to the community much more equal, I guess. I'm not really sure what your platform is or what you're hoping to achieve.
Hopefully you know about them. So it's a company called The New Wardrobe.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Great, cool. So what we're trying to do is...
Don't pitch.
Don't pitch?
Don't pitch.
I won't pitch. No, but the idea is that we can basically it's a clothes sharing platform, right? And so the idea then is to motivate people to actually put stuff up, and then get that to be borrowed from other people in the community. And I suppose it has that local element as well, because obviously logistically they have to be close to each other in the same way that your events are, so it has to be kind of local. It has to be kind of has to be fashionable, because that's kind of one of the core values is to try and. I'm pitching. Sorry.
Yeah, I think very well. I mean, I'm not sure if you do this already, but an obvious one that would kind of spring to mind in that sense is, why don't you take some of your super users on a photo shoot and shoot them swapping the clothes, using the clothes, wearing clothes that they've gotten, and share that back into the community. I mean, obviously Instagram would be a huge driver for you guys, and in terms of, you have both the stories, then you can do behind the scenes, you can do IGTV, you can do competition giveaways, you can do a hashtag to be featured, etc., etc. So I would just look at kind of, for example, what Depop have done and how they've just blown up the clothes industry and kind of the peer-to-peer selling. But sorry, I'm just thinking of, there's loads that you guys could do, and very affordably as well, particularly if you're hyper local.
The best thing we ever did at Huckletree was invest in cool merch. Genuinely, people go mad over totes. Yeah, they're not that expensive.
Last question, if there's still one. Yes, thank you.
I'm wondering what has been your biggest challenge that you had to overcome in the moving it from I don't have a better word, just like hobby, or to a viable business, and has it in any way, how has it affected the mechanics of the relationships between you ladies who have founded the platform?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. The biggest challenge definitely was the fact that we don't have a technical founder. So finding a technical advisor who had the best interests of us as individuals, us as a team, us as a company, was incredibly important. And I can't stress the importance of that enough. It's really changed things for us, because even when we were initially outsourcing, we didn't really have the knowledge to explain what we wanted or what we expected. Like, we were like, here's some money, build us an app. And actually that relationship is much deeper than that, and you need to have people that you can really rely on. He's also been incredibly helpful through the hiring process in terms of actually just giving people technical tests and things like that. So if you have an element of your company where you're incredibly weak on, particularly when it's one that's kind of vital for a technology company, it's incredibly important to surround yourself with people who can do that. The other thing is definitely around the hiring piece, because I think it's fine when you're all on the same level and you're all kind of equally invested in terms of ownership. But when you start hiring people, that really changes the dynamic of a relationship, particularly when you're hiring people that are older than you. We had a previous developer since moved on, but he, for example, was a lot older than I am with children. So even that is kind of, you're managing someone who was at a very different life stage than you. So I think it's incredibly important to kind of pull your team together, and it's something that we actively worked on. We brought in people to do psychometric testing, which sounds scary, but it's basically just you write down kind of various things and you get to know how to communicate best with people effectively. So we instilled kind of values and things into the company to make sure that everyone felt that they were being equally heard and equally valued, and that their needs were being equally looked after. I guess we had this kind of thing where one of our advisors just said, get to the point where everyone's equally unhappy, and then your team is balanced.
Thank you, it's a great question. I might just wrap with two final quick questions from me, because I just saw the pizza arrive, so we're going to finish quickly. What's the one number or metric or factor that keeps you up at night? And what do you do on bad days to get over those numbers not going the right way?
Oh God. Well, for us, it's a combination of things between just basically app registration and the daily actives. They're kind of things that you need to keep an eye on. In terms of bad days, I think if you're going to get bogged down by every bad day that happens, do not become an entrepreneur. Genuinely, because that's just not going to work out.
What do you turn to then on those bad days?
I don't know what I turn to. More work. Like we reward our hardworking team members with more hard work. So I think for us it's just a case of you genuinely just dig in and figure out, okay, this is a problem, how do we solve it? And we talk through problems with the entire team as well, so it's not just that one person feels isolated with their problem over here. It's like, this is a problem for me, which means it's a problem for everyone, and that's kind of what we do. And I don't think that's a magic formula. I don't know if you're turning to something is that wise, but it probably is more hard work, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's magic, but you'd be surprised at how few companies actually can put that into practice, and those who avoid it because it feels too difficult.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to call it a night. It's been fantastic having you here. We've never had a semi-concussed founder come along to share their wisdom. But certainly speaking for myself, I found it's so refreshing to hear from a founder who is creating so much good in the world and having such an impact. And I really hope that Áine is an example here for the community of being able to create something impactful and something good, and they'll still see some great and real world success. So big round of applause please for Áine.